The Galactic War Room of the Galactic Union's central headquarters was perhaps the most secure location in the known universe. Its walls, constructed from rare metals mined from the core of neutron stars, were said to be impenetrable to any known form of espionage. The room itself was a marvel of engineering, a perfect dodecahedron, with each face representing one of the 12 founding species of the Union. The lighting, a soft blue glow emanating from bioluminescent ceiling panels, cast eerie shadows across the faces of the gathered representatives. At the center of the room stood an enormous table carved from a single piece of translucent crystal, harvested from the ice moons of Proxima Centauri. The surface displayed holographic star maps, fleet positions, and resource allocations in real time, making it the perfect command center for coordinating interstellar military operations. Around this table sat the most powerful military minds in the galaxy. Some were physical beings with tentacles, exoskeletons, or multiple limbs. Others were consciousness constructs appearing as swirling patterns of light. Despite their biological differences, they shared a common purpose: maintaining galactic peace through careful strategy and, when necessary, overwhelming force. Yet amidst this assembly, one seat remained conspicuously empty. Unlike the others, which were tailored to the specific physiological needs of their occupants, this chair was deceptively simple, a standard-issue human chair designed for a bipedal creature with a singular head and 2 arms. Every individual who entered the war room for the first time inevitably asked about it, and every time the response was the same: "That's Earth's seat. We keep it empty." Admiral Zakar, the veteran strategist of the Andromeda Alliance, stared at the empty chair with a mixture of frustration and unease. His scaled skin, usually a confident green, had taken on a bluish tinge, a clear sign of anxiety among his species. As the most experienced military mind in the room, with over 300 standard galactic years of service, he had participated in countless strategic sessions. Yet none had been as perplexing as those involving human decisions. "Shall we begin the briefing?" His voice, deep and resonant, carried across the room without effort. The other representatives settled into their seats, appendages or energy fields positioned respectfully. All eyes or sensory apparatuses focused on him, except for a few that couldn't help but glance at the empty human chair. Ambassador Slix, the Arcturan representative, with his characteristic silver sheen and fluid movements, gestured toward the holographic display. "The border dispute in the Rigel sector requires immediate attention. The Hexan Empire is encroaching on vegan territory, and our intelligence suggests they're testing a new quantum displacement weapon." The junior representative attending their first strategic session raised a tentative appendage. Their bioluminescent patterns flashed in a sequence indicating confusion. "Respected colleagues, my briefing mentioned that this sector falls within the Sol Proximity Zone. Should we not consult with the humans?" A silence fell over the room. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably. High Counselor Jem Hadar, whose crystalline structure glittered under the room's lighting, finally spoke, their voice like chimes in a gentle breeze. "Young one, there are protocols. The humans are aware of the situation. Whether they choose to involve themselves is entirely their decision." But the empty chair, the junior representative persisted. "If they're part of the Union, shouldn't we at least invite them too?" "They're not." Admiral Zakar interrupted, his scales now taking on a reddish hue. "That's what's so maddening about them. The humans have consistently refused formal membership in the Galactic Union. They decline our invitations, ignore our protocols, and yet they're the most consequential species in galactic affairs." Ambassador Slix finished. His silver surface rippled with what passed for a sigh among his kind. A paradox indeed. The meeting progressed with strategies proposed and debated. Fleet deployments were analyzed, diplomatic initiatives considered, and resource allocations reviewed. Throughout it all, the empty chairs seemed to grow more conspicuous, like a silent evaluator of their decisions. As the session approached its conclusion, Admiral Zakar found himself returning to the subject that had been troubling him for decades. There's something else we need to discuss. The human intervention in the Tau Ceti conflict. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Tau Ceti conflict had been a relatively minor dispute between two non-union species over mining rights in an asteroid belt. By all standard protocols, it should have resolved itself through local arbitration, or at worst, a limited exchange of hostilities. Instead, it had evolved into what many now called the Tau Ceti conundrum. The humans had no stake in the outcome. Admiral Zakar continued, his frustration evident. No treaties with either party, no resource dependencies, no strategic interests. Yet a small human diplomatic vessel arrived engaged in what they called casual conversations with both sides, and within 20 standard cycles, not only had the conflict been resolved, but the two species had formed an unprecedented resource-sharing collective that's now outperforming established Union mining operations by 27%. The junior representative's bioluminescence brightened with what seemed like admiration. Is that not a positive outcome? That's not the point, Zakar replied sharply. The point is predictability, strategy. The humans operate outside our frameworks, beyond our understanding. They achieve results through methods we cannot replicate or even comprehend, and that makes them. Dangerous supplied High Counselor Jem'Hadar their crystalline form refracting the light in complex patterns. Or invaluable, perhaps both. Ambassador Slicks raised a gleaming appendage. I propose we formalize our approach to human involvement, perhaps if we established a predictable framework for. We've tried, interrupted Zakar, 17 times in the past century alone. They listen politely, thank us for our interesting perspectives, and then proceed to ignore every protocol we establish. And yet, Slicks countered, isn't it true that human involvement has, statistically speaking, led to more stable outcomes in 89% of documented cases? Zakar couldn't argue with the statistics, but that only increased his unease. The outcomes aren't the issue, it's the methodology. We cannot rely on a force we don't understand. The meeting adjourned without resolution, as so many discussions of humanity did. As the representatives filed out, Admiral Zakar remained staring at the empty chair. In his centuries of service, he had confronted countless threats from rogue AI swarms to quantum-entangled hive minds capable of simultaneous attacks across multiple star systems. Yet none had disturbed him as profoundly as the humans with their unpredictable decision-making and inexplicable successes. What troubled him most was not fear of human aggression. Indeed, they rarely initiated conflicts. Rather, it was the fundamental incomprehensibility of their strategies, the way they achieved outcomes through seemingly arbitrary actions that no advanced prediction algorithm could anticipate. The empty chair, he realized, was not just a symbol of respect or caution. It was an admission of the limits of understanding. And in a universe where comprehension was the foundation of control, that was perhaps the most unsettling realization of all. Admiral Zakar was pulled from his contemplation by an urgent communication alert. The holographic display above the table flickered, reformatting to show a tactical overview of a previously unremarkable star system near the fringe of what humans called the Orion Arm. Computer explain alert? Zakar commanded, his scales shifting to an alert orange hue. Priority intelligence from Union Observation Post Lambda 12. The system responded in its neutral voice. Hexen Warfleet detected in proximity to human colony world. Designate New Horizon. Engagement imminent. Zakar's scales blanched to pale yellow shock. The Hexen were aggressive, certainly, but not suicidal. What could possibly drive them to provoke the humans directly? He activated the room's emergency assembly protocol, sending an alert to all senior staff. Within moments, the war room was once again filled with the Union's top strategists, all expressing various biological signs of alarm. Ambassador Slicks arrived last, his silver surface rippling with agitation. Is it confirmed the Hexen are genuinely planning an attack on a human world? 17 Dreadnought-class vessels supported by approximately 200 smaller craft. Zakar replied, displaying the sensor data. Their trajectory and formation leave no doubt about their intentions. Have the humans responded? High Counselor Jem'Hadar asked, their crystalline structure vibrating with tension. No observable fleet movements. Zakar reported, studying the tactical display with increasing confusion. Their orbital defenses remain at standard alert levels. No evacuation protocols initiated. It's as if they're unaware or unconcerned. Ambassador Slicks finished, a ripple of disbelief crossing his reflective surface. The junior representative, who had been studying the data with remarkable composure, raised a question. What is the strategic value of this human colony? Perhaps they've calculated that its loss is acceptable. That's not how humans operate. Zakar responded, his tone suggesting this was fundamental knowledge. They assign value to individual lives in ways that defy strategic logic. I've seen them divert entire fleets to rescue a single stranded colonist. Then why aren't they responding? The junior representative pressed. The Hexen will reach weapons range within 36 standard hours. Unknown. Zakar admitted, the word tasting bitter in his mouth. And that is precisely why that chair remains empty. Because when it comes to humans, unknown is the most common strategic assessment. As the hours passed, the tension in the war room increased exponentially. The Hexen fleet maintained its aggressive approach, while human defenses remained passive. Union observers positioned at the edge of the system reported no unusual communications, no fleet movements, nothing to indicate the humans were even aware of the impending attack. At the 12-hour mark, Admiral Zakar made an unprecedented decision. Open a direct channel to Earth's Central Command. The room fell silent. Direct communication with human military leadership outside of established diplomatic channels was extremely rare, bordering on protocol violation. Channel established, the system announced after a moment. Earth Command acknowledges. A holographic representation appeared above the table, a human female, in what Zakar recognized as their naval uniform, admiral insignia visible on the collar. Her expression was pleasant, almost casual, at odds with the gravity of the situation. Admiral Zakar, this is Admiral Chen from Earth Command. To what do we owe the pleasure? Her voice was calm, devoid of the urgency the situation demanded. Admiral Chen, our intelligence indicates a Hexen war fleet is approximately 12 standard hours from engaging your colony at New Horizon. We observe no defensive preparations on your part and wished to verify you are aware of the situation. The human's expression didn't change. Yes, we're tracking them. Thank you for your concern, Admiral. Zakar waited for elaboration, for an explanation of the human strategy, for any indication of their planned response. None came. Admiral Chen. He continued, his scales shifting to a frustrated purple. The Hexen force consists of 17 capital ships with significant escort. Your colony's standard defenses cannot repel such a force. Do you require Union assistance? The human smiled, a gesture Zakar had learned indicated either genuine amusement or, more disturbingly, concealed strategic thinking. That's very kind, Admiral Zakar, but unnecessary. The situation is being monitored. Before Zakar could press further, the human continued. While I have you, though, I'd like to inquire about the Union's stance on the recent transportation technology sharing agreement between the Arcturan Federation and the Vega Cooperative. Our analysts find some of the provisions interesting. The abrupt change of subject was so jarring that Zakar momentarily lost his train of thought. That's a matter for diplomatic channels, Admiral. Our immediate concern is the Hexen threat to your colony. Of course. Admiral Chen nodded. As I said, that situation is being monitored. I believe Ambassador Slicks is present. Perhaps he could provide some context on the transportation agreement. All eyes in the war room turned to the Arcturan representative, whose silver surface had gone completely still, a sign of extreme discomfort among his species. Would be happy to schedule a diplomatic briefing on the matter at an appropriate time, he managed. Excellent, the human responded. We appreciate the Union's continued transparency now. If there's nothing else urgent, the Hexen fleet. Zakar insisted, what is your planned response? Admiral Chen's expression became thoughtful. Response? Oh, I imagine they'll turn around before they reach New Horizon. Safe travels, Admiral Zakar. The communication ended, leaving the war room in stunned silence. What just happened? The junior representative finally asked, their bioluminescence pulsing with confusion. That, High Counselor Jem'Hadar responded, was a typical human strategic communication, simultaneously revealing nothing while implying everything. She seemed certain the Hexen would retreat. Ambassador Slicks noted his surface still unusually rigid. Based on what intelligence, what capability? More concerning, Zakar added, was her specific mention of the transportation technology agreement. An agreement that officially hasn't been announced outside closed diplomatic channels. The implications hung in the air. Either the humans had intelligence sources deep within the Union's most secure communications, or Zakar didn't want to consider the alternative. The next 10 hours passed in tense monitoring. The Hexen fleet maintained its course now, just 2 hours from weapons range of the human colony. The Union war room remained at full alert with various species' biological stress indicators becoming increasingly evident. Then, without warning or apparent cause, the Hexen fleet began to decelerate. Computer analyze Hexen fleet behavior. Zakar commanded, his scales shifting to a cautious blue-green. Hexen vessels executing synchronized deceleration. Current trajectory analysis indicates preparation for course reversal. The system responded. No weapon systems activated. Communication emissions suggest internal disagreement among Hexen command structure. They're turning around, Ambassador Slicks said, his silver surface rippling with disbelief. Without firing a single shot. Without the humans deploying any defensive measures, how is this possible? Perhaps they detected defenses our sensors cannot, suggested one representative. Or received new intelligence that altered their strategic calculus, offered another. Or, said Zakar quietly, the humans communicated something to them that we know nothing about. The Hexen fleet completed its course reversal and accelerated away from the human colony, maintaining perfect formation as if executing a planned maneuver rather than a retreat. Should we contact Admiral Chen for an explanation? The junior representative asked. Zakar considered this for a moment, then shook his head, scales settling into a resigned gray. No, she already told us what would happen. They would turn around. And they did. Any further inquiry would likely yield equally oblique responses. The incident, soon dubbed the New Horizon non-event, became yet another entry in the growing catalog of human strategic anomalies. In the weeks that followed, various theories circulated throughout Union intelligence channels. Perhaps the humans had deployed some undetectable weapon system, or had leverage over Hexen leadership, or had demonstrated some capability so terrifying that the Hexen had reconsidered their aggression. None of these theories could be confirmed, and human representatives, when questioned, merely smiled and changed the subject. 3 standard months after the New Horizon incident, the Galactic Union War Room once again convened for its regular strategic assessment, as the representatives took their customary places. Admiral Zakar noticed something unexpected. The junior representative was engaged in conversation with a human. This was unusual in itself, as humans rarely attended these sessions. But what caught Zakar's attention was the human's uniform. It bore the insignia of Earth's diplomatic corps, not their military, and the human's demeanor was relaxed, almost casual, as they conversed with the young representative. Admiral Zakar. The human greeted him with a nod as he approached. I'm Diplomatic Attaché Maxwell. I understand you had some concerns about the New Horizon situation a few months back. Zakar's scales flickered between diplomatic green and suspicious orange. I found the lack of observable response to a credible threat confusing. The human smiled that same inscrutable expression that Admiral Chen had displayed. I thought I might provide some context off the record, of course. This was unexpected. Humans almost never volunteered strategic information. Zakar indicated assent, his scales settling into an attentive pattern. The Hexen incursion was a test, Maxwell explained, lowering his voice. Not of our defenses, but of our intelligence network. They wanted to determine if we could detect fleet movements when they used their new quantum masking technology. Zakar processed this. So, they never intended to attack. Oh, they absolutely did, the human corrected. If we had shown no awareness, they would have proceeded with the assault, but the purpose was intelligence gathering, not conquest. And your response? Zakar couldn't help asking. We detected no defensive deployments, no fleet movements. Maxwell's expression became thoughtful. Admiral, do you know much about Earth's classical military history? The abrupt change of subject was typically human, but Zakar had learned to follow these conversational detours. Some. Your species has an unusual fascination with studying past conflicts. Indeed. There's an ancient text called The Art of War by a strategist named Sun Tzu. One of his principles is that the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Zakar waited for elaboration, but none came. After a moment, he ventured, So you threatened the Hexen somehow diplomatically? The human smiled again. Not exactly. We simply arranged for certain information to reach the Hexen fleet commander, specifically data regarding an incident in the Proxima system from about 70 years ago. Are you familiar with it? Zakar's scales blanched to pale yellow the second time in recent memory. The Proxima incident is classified at the highest levels. Is it? Maxwell looked genuinely surprised. How interesting. Well, in any case, once the Hexen commander reviewed that information, he made the logical decision to withdraw. Before Zakar could respond, the human continued. I should take my leave. I'm not actually authorized to attend these sessions. I just wanted to introduce myself, as I'll be the new liaison for strategic communications. You're not taking the seat, Zakar asked, indicating the empty human chair that had become such a significant symbol. Maxwell glanced at it and smiled. No one takes that seat, Admiral. That's rather the point. As the human departed, Zakar found himself more unsettled than before the explanation. What exactly had happened in the Proxima system 70 years ago? The incident was indeed classified with only vague references in the Union's most secure archives, something about a Hexen expedition that had disappeared without explanation while investigating an apparently abandoned human research outpost. The strategic session proceeded as usual, but Zakar found his attention repeatedly drawn to the empty human chair. After the meeting, he approached High Counselor Jem'Hadar, who had been in service longer than any other current representative. Counselor, Zakar began carefully. What do you know about the Proxima incident? The crystalline being's structure seemed to dim slightly. Why do you ask, Admiral? The human diplomatic attaché mentioned it in relation to the Hexen withdrawal at New Horizon. He implied that information about the incident was shared with the Hexen commander. Jem'Hadar's crystalline structure emitted a low, resonating hum, a sign of deep concern. Walk with me, Admiral. This conversation should not occur in recorded spaces. They moved to one of the Union headquarters' meditation gardens designed to accommodate the biological needs of various species. Here, among living plants from 100 worlds, sound-dampening fields ensured privacy. The Proxima incident is not merely classified. The counselor began, their voice barely above a whisper. It is actively suppressed, not by Union protocol, but by mutual agreement among all species who value their continued existence. Zakar's scales shifted to deep blue, the color of profound concern. I don't understand. 72 standard years ago, the Hexen discovered what appeared to be an abandoned human research facility on the fourth planet of the Proxima Centauri system. Against established protocol, they sent a military expedition rather than a diplomatic inquiry, 20 ships over 10,000 personnel. And Zakar prompted when the counselor paused. And 19 of those ships with all personnel aboard simply ceased to exist. Zakar waited for elaboration. Destroyed by what weapon? Not destroyed, Jem'Hadar corrected. There was no debris, no radiation, no evidence of conventional or even exotic weaponry. According to the sole surviving vessel, which had remained at the system's edge as a communications relay, the other ships reported normal operations until a human vessel appeared. There was a brief communication, the content of which was never disclosed. Then the ships were simply gone, as if they had never been there at all. That's not possible. Zakar insisted, his scales now pale with disbelief. No known technology can... Precisely, the counselor interrupted. No known technology. The surviving Hexan commander was interrogated extensively by their own government. His testimony, which eventually reached Union intelligence, suggested that the human vessel had somehow removed the Hexan ships from reality itself. Removed from reality. Zakar repeated, unable to conceive of such a capability. The commander's exact words, translated as closely as possible, were, "They did not destroy our ships. They reached backward through time and ensured they were never built." A long silence followed as Zakar processed this. That cannot be accurate. Time manipulation on that scale is theoretically impossible. The energy requirements alone would... Admiral Jem'Hadar interrupted gently. In your centuries of strategic experience, how many times have humans operated within the boundaries of what other species consider theoretically possible? The question hung in the air, unanswerable. The empty chair, the counselor continued after a moment, began as a diplomatic courtesy. A recognition that humans, while not formal Union members, were nonetheless a significant galactic power. But over time, its meaning has evolved. Into what? Zakar asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. A reminder. Jem'Hadar replied, their crystalline structure glittering in the garden's soft light. That when we make our strategic calculations, we must account for variables we cannot measure and capabilities we cannot comprehend. The humans operate beyond our strategic frameworks, beyond our understanding of what is possible. So the chair remains empty because to truly understand how humans think, to fully integrate them into our strategic planning, would require us to abandon foundations of logic and causality that our civilizations have relied upon for millennia. The counselor's tone held a note of what might have been admiration. The empty chair acknowledges that there will always be an element of humanity that remains outside our comprehension, and that this incomprehensibility itself is a strategic factor we must respect. In the months that followed, Admiral Zakar found his strategic thinking subtly but fundamentally altered. In each calculation, each projection, each deployment recommendation, he now included what he privately termed the human factor, an acknowledgement of unknown variables and unpredictable outcomes. The Hexan, meanwhile, announced a comprehensive restructuring of their military doctrine, emphasizing diplomatic engagement and non-confrontational expansion. Their fleet deployments near human-controlled space ceased entirely. 6 standard months after the New Horizon incident, the Galactic Union War Room convened for what seemed like a routine strategic assessment. As the representatives took their places, Admiral Zakar noticed something unprecedented. A human was present. Not standing at the periphery as an observer, not engaged in casual conversation, but seated at the table, not in the empty chair that had become such a powerful symbol, but in a new seat positioned between Ambassador Slicks and the junior representative. The human, a distinguished-looking male with silver at his temples, wore the formal uniform of Earth's Combined Defense Forces. He nodded politely as the representatives arrived, but offered no explanation for his presence. Finally, as the session was about to begin, High Counselor Jem'Hadar addressed the obvious question. We welcome Earth's representative to this strategic assessment. May we inquire as to the change in policy? The human smiled, that same inscrutable expression that Zakar had come to both dread and respect. Thank you, Counselor. I am Admiral Kazuo, Earth Combined Forces Strategic Command. My government has decided that more direct communication may be beneficial at this juncture. And the empty chair? Ambassador Slicks asked, his silver surface rippling with curiosity. Will it now be occupied? Admiral Kazuo glanced at the chair in question, then shook his head. No. That remains reserved for its purpose. Which is? The junior representative asked, bold in their inexperience. The human's expression became thoughtful. To remind us all that strategies might be carefully arranged in well-constructed physical spaces, but the unforeseen has its own separate and crucial seat at every table. As the session proceeded, with the human offering occasional insights, but largely observing, Admiral Zakar found his gaze repeatedly drawn to the empty chair. He understood now that it represented something more profound than mere diplomatic protocol or strategic caution. The empty chair was a philosophical statement about the nature of the universe itself, that no matter how advanced their technologies became, no matter how sophisticated their strategic algorithms, there would always be an element of the unpredictable, the incomprehensible, the transformative. And humanity, with its baffling decision-making and inexplicable capabilities, had somehow become the living embodiment of that principle. In every war room across the galaxy, across 1,000 species and civilizations, the tradition of the empty Earth chair spread. Not out of fear, not out of respect, but out of a profound recognition that the universe was fundamentally stranger than any strategic doctrine could encompass. The empty chair remained a silent reminder that in the cosmic game of strategy, the most powerful piece might be the one that refused to acknowledge it was playing at all. A year after the New Horizon incident, the Galactic Union formally adopted a resolution. It stated in diplomatic language, carefully crafted to avoid offense, that all strategic planning sessions throughout Union space should include an unoccupied seat designated as reserved for Earth perspective. When asked about this unusual protocol, Union representatives merely smiled, an expression they had unconsciously adopted from their human counterparts, and changed the subject. And somewhere in the halls of Earth's Strategic Command, Admiral Chen viewed the Union's new protocol with quiet satisfaction. They're finally beginning to understand, she remarked to her staff. The most powerful statement in the room is the one that remains unspoken. The empty chair placed at every war table throughout the galaxy became humanity's most profound contribution to interstellar diplomacy, a symbol not of absence, but of the ultimate presence, the acknowledgement that reality itself might bend in ways no strategy could anticipate. And in the darkest corners of space, where conflicts still flared despite the Union's best efforts, commanders of all species would glance at that empty chair and pause, reconsidering their plans with a new uncertainty. For if humans, with their seemingly limited technology and biological fragility, could rewrite the rules of causality itself, what other assumptions might prove false? In the end, the empty chair became not just a symbol, but a question, one that no species, not even humanity itself, could fully answer.